Today on Popek-Popek Live, we're going to be discussing our consumption of local books and writings. Now, this is coming after National Laureate Professor Dr. Siti Zainon Ismail said that students haven't been exposed enough to local literature, which she sees as an important source of information in developing future leaders.
And she added that students must be more aware of the beauty, the moral truth and aesthetic excellence that our literature offers, and which we can understand and appreciate. And she also suggests that there's a lot that we can learn from classical works of literature, even though they may be old.
I just want to repeat that phrase: beauty, moral truth, and aesthetic excellence. That's our national laureate right there. That's a beautiful bunch of phrases. Now, having said that, I mean, she was talking about students.
Students, yeah.
But it probably extends to adults, right? This idea of whether or not we read enough local books, whether or not we read enough local writing, poetry. It's not just students that are perhaps not doing this as much. And so, because it's interesting to think about this exact topic, how much local books do we read and what shapes whether we read them or not, we sent out our interns, Shamin and Melina, to go get some views from the public. Here's what they came back with.
Do you read local literature?
No, I'm the kind of person who is a visual kind of person. So I like pictures more than reading words because, I'm a visual kind of person. I understand more through pictures rather than words.
No, I don't have time maybe.
No, because I don't read literature at all. I seldom read, that's the problem.
I have started reading local literature. Ever since starting writing creative fiction of my own, I've made a real effort to read Malaysian writers, yes.
What was the last book you read?
Well, I'm still going through Zen Cho's Spirits Abroad at the moment, and it's a collection of short stories about various hantus and pontianaks, and it's fantastic. It's so creative, but I really like the fact that because it's local literature, I feel an instant connection to the characters, not just the hantus and the pontianak.
We're talking today about local literature, and we want to know how much of that have you read? When you read, do you tend to seek out local books? Do you tend to seek out local authors? Would you like to share your favorites? You can call us at 77332900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, and tweet us at BFM Radio.
Well, I'm ashamed to say that I don't read local literature as frequently as I do foreign ones. And so today I've been trying to think, why is that the case? And I still haven't figured it out, but it's just basically my level of interest, really, because when I go to bookshops, for example, a lot of the local Malay language books that I see especially are like romantic stories or religious books, or romantic and religious books, which
that's a popular subgenre.
It is,
yes.
Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily fit the mood that I'm at when I am at a bookshop. So maybe that can explain one of the reasons why I don't really go out and buy local books. But
I think there is that. I do think that more often than not, if you are shopping around for books, it's likely going to be what's on the bookshelves that attract you. So it's also about, I think, where local books are sold and what kind, right? So again, if you're talking about popular fiction, then yes, I've seen all those books. They tend to be quite slim. They tend to have a very specific sort of cover and a little bit poppy, a little bit sensationalist, very romance heavy. And in those instances, I'm not always attracted to them. But like you, I think I'm somebody who wishes I read more local fiction or more local books in general. So here on the station, my friend Sharmila Ganesan and I have a little book show that happens on Tuesday evenings at 8 o'clock called By the Book. By the way, tune in, check out the podcast. But we talk about this quite often, the fact that we would like to read more local literature, but more often than not, it does seem like a little bit of a blind spot. When you go out and purchase, you might be attracted to what you see winning the Booker prizes. You might be attracted to what's on the best. You're attracted to the books that they place right front and center in the bookshops. Yeah. That's not always local books.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, when there are some bookshops who do place like top 10 best-selling Malay language books, and literally it's all romance novels, and I would say that even though it's not my taste, it doesn't suit my interest, but definitely for sure there's a lot of demand for these kind of stories. So I mean, it just makes me wonder whether there are these sort of like hidden segments of our readership that maybe have have not had their interests whetted through these local production of books, and whether, or maybe it's published in like independent outlets, for example.
So I truly have, so I've been reading a lot more local books this year. And again, it is primarily because we're interviewing these authors or we're going to review the books. And so I'm reading it for that reason. And it's been a very nice side benefit, I think, of having a book show and wanting to have that sort of local flavor to it. Otherwise, left to my own devices, I think I could not very happily, I think I could just go on and on not reading local books. And it's a real pity because the books that I've read this year have been some of my absolute favorites. I've really enjoyed the experience of reading it. It makes me proud that there are Malaysian writers writing so beautifully, writing so well. And it makes it feel a little more possible that someday I might write something worth reading. So it's a whole series. It's a cascade effect, I think. And all that leads me to think it's absolutely true when you look at the fact that it starts young, right? If our students are not getting that love of reading local books instilled at a young age, I think it can be tough after that to carry on when it's not, like I said, front and center.
Yeah, because in schools, of course, students are asked to read books for Bahasa Malaysia, for example, or even English. But these are books that they have to read, not that they want to read out of interest. So in a way, it's imposed on them. So I wonder how useful or effective is it to make them read these books rather than allow them to choose from a selection of books, for example, so that it can generate a long-lasting interest in reading local literature.
That, and also choice, so important when you're in school. When you're forced to do something, even if it's fun, a little bit of the pleasure has been drained away by the fact that an adult is making you do it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you get the choice, I think it makes a huge difference. So we're going to be speaking after this with Dr. Susan Phillip, who is an associate professor in English at the Department of English and the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences in University of Malaya. And that's going to be coming your way. But like I said, let us know. Are you somebody who reads a lot of local literature? Do you wish you did? And what are some of your favorites? Share them with us. 77332900 is that number to call. WhatsApp 018-789-8899 and tweet us at BFM Radio.
Business, finance, and music. BFM 89.9.
You're with Lynn and Aiman, and we are talking today, we're in our little segment called Popek-Popek Life, talking about a call that's come from National Laureate Professor Dr. Siti Zainon Ismail for students to get more exposure to local literature. So we're talking about that, but also asking the adults who are listening to us, when was the last time you read a local book, and did you enjoy it, and what was it? Tell us. Again, those numbers, 77332900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, and tweet us at BFM Radio.
So we're joined now by Dr. Susan Phillip, who is the Associate Professor in English at the University of Malaya. Dr. Susan, thank you very much for being on our program.
Thank you for having me.
So based on your observations, would you agree that our students, or maybe Malaysians in general, lack exposure to local literature?
I would say they lack exposure to literature, full stop.
I was worried you'd say that.
They're certainly not getting it at school. I mean, I think based on what I've seen my own children going through at Sekolah Kebangsaan, what literature they are provided, especially in English, it tends to be, abridged or shortened. And I think they lose a lot of the richness of the books that they could otherwise be exposed to. But also, I think the parents are to blame here because there's so much focus on study, don't read. Reading is, just wasting time. So I think it has to be seen as something that can enrich you in many ways rather than just being a pastime,
Right. And do you think that there is something there to be said about exams and the way in which we include reading in schools? Because like you said, I think when people read the abridged version, more often than not, it's for the sake of time, but it's also because you think you need to leap ahead and know what happens in the narrative as opposed to appreciating the language, right? So does this also have to do with how we teach and how we test when it comes to literature?
Yeah, I think so. We're so focused on passing exams and memorizing things. And I always tell my students here at the English department when they worry about memorizing things, I say, look, I'm not testing you on your memory. If you just paraphrase, but you get the message across, that's fine. But to get out of that, schools could introduce just reading periods. I remember when I went to school, I had teachers who would select books for us based on what they thought would interest us. And I always ended up getting books that I would never have picked myself, but once I started reading them, they were amazing. And that, it was not examinable. It was just something we did every week. And it really exposed me to so much. It really developed my interest in reading a wide variety of books.
So in school, students are told to read certain books. I believe it's every year, at least one book. And I guess it's meant to teach students how to sort of analyze literature, for example, understand what are the themes and questions that are being asked in the book.
Yeah.
At the same time, we want students to appreciate literature as well. Do you think asking this through examinations is the best way to teach students how to appreciate literature?
It depends on how the exams are set. If you set exams and you feel that the students should be giving certain kinds of answers, as I think happens very often, you have to answer to the set answers, then that is just going to encourage memorization. But if you create assessments which allow students to really respond personally, which allow for multiple interpretations and so on, that might spark their interest more, rather than marking to an exam, if you know what I mean.
Right. And turning our attention then, I think, to specifically reading local, what do you think is the value of knowing and appreciating local literature? Because I think like we've both been talking about, even if you are a reader, sometimes local books might be a blind spot.
Yes, I would agree with that because, well, unfortunately, I think local books don't get marketed as well. We don't have that kind of budget. And very often what people choose to read has a lot to do with marketing. And I have to admit that I came to reading local literature fairly late in life. But now that I have, I do see the value in it. Of course, I see the value because who else is going to speak about our experience? Who else is going to give us a voice, if not local writers? For that reason alone, we have to go back to local writers. We have to learn to value what they say. And we've also got writers of international reputation. You have Tan Tuan Eng, Tash Aw, Zen Cho, Shili Kao, who are, I think, up there also with the old stalwarts such as Wong Pui Nam, who has just recently come up with a new collection of poetry, K.S. Maniam, Kitwan Chai. There are so many names that grace, the shelves of our books, and certainly we should be going back to them.
And you mentioned that you are sort of a late-in-life local reader as well. And I was curious, how did that come about and what was that journey like, I suppose, for you as a reader?
Well, I studied overseas. I went to school overseas. It was only when I was doing my university that I came back here. So for that reason, I just wasn't exposed to local writing. But even when I came back, I was still very much stuck in the Western literature mode. Until, I don't know, I guess I grew up or something. Because at one point I thought, no, hang on. What I'm reading about when I read these English playwrights, it's really got very little to do with me. And so then I made a conscious decision to start looking at Malaysian playwrights. And that eventually led me to my PhD subject, and this is now my area of specialization. And I find it a very rich area as well.
And how would the experience of reading local literature differ from reading stories that originate from a different country?
I think it's a matter of, partly it's a matter of familiarity. What people are writing about locally, it's stuff that you have experienced. These are questions that you've come up against or experiences that you've gone through yourself. And oddly enough, on the other hand, there is also a certain level of unfamiliarity because we live in this multicultural context and we don't know everything about each other, which I think is the value of local literature is that it can expose us to each other in a way that might not be happening in schools or in society. Yeah, so, it just it opens the doors to each other, if I could say that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that experience of reading local books. And with so many different genres and writers working at the moment, would you have any sort of recommendations for reading for any, I was going to say young Malaysian, but I suppose even any Malaysian who might be listening to this and thinking, yeah, it's about time I pick up a local book?
Well, can I recommend my current favorite is Zen Cho.
Zen Cho is lovely. Yeah.
Yes, I'm a fantasy fan, and so I naturally gravitate towards her books, but they are so beautifully written. And especially in her second novel, she incorporates the Malayan myths so seamlessly that, if you want to read a book that is local but at the same time thoroughly entertaining and a joy to read, go with Zen Cho.
When I go to bookshops, right, when I look around for a local Malay book, a lot of the books I see are really romantic books or religious or romantic and religious books. Why is that the case?
That's true. I imagine that is what sells, I suppose. If you're a publisher, you want to make money. So, if romance sells, then that's what you're going to go to. But also this goes back to what happens at school. And if you're not exposed at school to more challenging work, or even at home, then that's your comfort zone. You're not going to want to go for more challenging work. It's just easier to sit back and relax with something, with a romance book, right? So it does go back to education, whether at school or at home. Expose people to challenging work. Don't let them just slide by with what's easy.
Right. And I suppose on that note, something that I wanted to finish on and that I was curious for your perspective on, like you said, there is, I think to a degree, a lack of exposure. There is also very often a lack of time when it comes to reading for many people. So what would you say are some good entry points or some good ways to get into the habit? Because I think for a lot of people, it's like, reading is good for you, quote unquote, and yet it can feel like a difficult habit to pick up. So how would you suggest some easy ways for people to get started in the habit of reading?
I think one simple thing would be make it a point that you will read before you go to sleep during those 10 minutes. That's when I read. And usually 10 minutes is all I can take before I fall asleep. But, 10 minutes a night, I do eventually get through a novel. So it is a matter of saying, you know what, this is important. I need to do this. I need to set aside time, just as I set aside time, say, to go to the gym or to have a meal. Or, I don't know, some people might critique me for this, but read while you're eating. I grew up doing that, and I don't think it did me any harm. So you just have to find, time, set aside time consciously to read.
That was Dr. Susan Phillip, Associate Professor in English at the University of Malaya, talking to us about local literature and really just getting into the habit of reading, because we have just heard today from our National Laureate, Professor Dr. Siti Zainon Ismail. Students are not being exposed enough to local literature, which is, I think, an experience that we see reflected even here in the studio. Yeah,
even as adults, and by our Vox Pops earlier as well, in today's story, we found that a lot of adults don't read local books as well, and we're just trying to understand and self-reflect why that is the case.
Yeah, so we want to know what your favorite local reads have been, or whether or not you are, in fact, do you read local books? Do you read local literature? Is it something that you would like to do more of? You can call us and let us know, 7733 2900, WhatsApp 018-789-8899, tweet us at BFM Radio. We have a couple of messages here. First up, Munif Malik saying, y'all ever read Karusi back in school? That was real trippy. I still don't know what it was all about. In fact, I'm not even sure if the memory of reading it is even real. Would make for a really interesting movie adaptation, that one.
I vaguely remember that one. If I'm not mistaken, it was written by Hatta Azad Khan. And yes, I do remember it was quite trippy. And I think you have spiked my interest in it to read it again and see if it would actually be a good movie adaptation.
And then we have Mohan who says, I remember reading Bukit Kepong and Concerto Ta'ahe as a part of the BM syllabus 17 years ago. It was so good. Bukit Kepong especially will remain one of the best books I have ever read. And I think I would be showing my age here as well to say that those were the exact books that I remember reading as part of my BM SPM preparation. And I agree, Bukit Kepong is kind of it's kind of like an action thriller. It's actually a very enjoyable read.
It's like the 300 of the Malaysian police force, is it?
Pretty much. I mean, that's how it feels. And I would agree. I remember it very vividly. Concerto Ta'ahe is sort of a little... I remember the cover, I think, a bit better than I remember the book.
There was a piano involved as well?
There was a piano. There was a love story. There was what looks like Stephen Gately of Boyzone pretty much illustrated on the cover. That's what I recall. I would say that of the local authors that I've read this year, the book that I've enjoyed the most has been The Night Tiger by Yang Zi Chu, which is this really wonderful telling, set in Malaya. I don't want to spoil it, but I will say that there are weird tigers or harimau jadian in the book. So
that's interesting.
I thoroughly recommend it. I really, really enjoyed it. It's the evening edition, BFM 89.9.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To find more great interviews, go to bfm.my, BFM 89.9, the business station.